or, we feel that, as opposed to say, there's only one way to do things and this was the only responsible choice. Because we're all in this together, and there are some very responsible camp directors who will choose to open their camps. Okay, that's off the top of my head as kind of a general introduction, and there are also some very practical aspects of this in terms of communications with families, finances, and summer programming. And ours is an independent camp. Tracy's is not for profit. I don't know, Tracy, do you want to sort of pick up on that and talk about some of the steps you've gone through and some of the general areas that you've been addressing?
Sure. Thanks, Peter. And I would also like to express the Bob Ditter's webinar was great. And, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go back if you have made the choice to close or if you do. I work with, ours is a very small nonprofit for low income and foster girls, and we provide full camper scholarships. So one of our pressing, I guess we're going to start off with communications on how we rolled it out. It was really important for us that our campers hear from us first. So there were lot of phone calls we made. And then, from after the campers and campers' parents, we went on to, the staff also heard all direct phone calls. I think each camp, you all know your camps the best. Vendors also got phone calls. There was a lot of phone calls, a lot of, 2 days, kind of 3 days of the phone was very, very busy. For the most part, we also got very positive responses from our camp community. I also work with a board of directors who advised us, and we spent a lot of time talking and discussing the pros and cons. But I also like to, repeat Peter's too. It's really important not to be judgmental of people. Each of us know our own camps best, and how we feel we can keep people safe. And the summer camp just came down to the fact we're a short season also. We're 10 days at a time, and we just didn't feel like we had the the structure to keep everybody safe. So I mean, that's the rolling out is hard. It's very heartbreaking in a lot of ways, because like all of our kids need camps more than ever right now. And for each of our campers, it's hard to hear their response. I mean, the kids knew it was for the best, but they were also very, very heartbroken. A lot of tears. So, I don't know, Peter, if you want to add.
A couple of thoughts that come to mind. One is that the communication with all these different constituencies is really important. And I'm glad you mentioned the vendors. If you have time, and we took a little bit extra time before we announced our decision, we sent out a message to vendors that said, we're thinking about this, and we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And we kind of broke the news to people gradually. But vendors are a big part of that. Alums, I'm sure, and donors. So they were part of the rollout. For those of you who use the referral services, the referral agencies, they really appreciate hearing from us. They're hurting, I'm sure, and some empathy from us really goes a long way. So that's one thing in terms of rolling things out all at once. And we also, at the same time that we were sending out all these emails, we also made changes to our website and our registration software, so that we tried to do everything all within a couple of hours, so that if families were referred to the website, they were seeing something that we had promised them, and so that if they tried to access their account, it was relevant to our status. It was a busy day, really, really busy, crazy day. A lot of Zoom meetings. Sometimes we tried to identify groups that would want to hear this first before they heard it from their friends and associates. So really significant alums and staff were part of Zoom conversations a day or two ahead of time. I'm seeing a question. It says, did anyone restrict comments on their social media? I'm afraid campers will find out before their parents can let them know. Um, we, we were pretty fortunate in that we were able to sort of control it and get the people who had advanced knowledge to kind of keep this private. And we told them when it would roll out, at which point they could start talking about it. And then we're seeing some other comments. We waited to do social media for 24 hours. Probably a very good idea. Yeah.
That's what we did. We contacted all our camper families and made sure they knew. And then we held our social media for, we held it for 48 hours.
And we're seeing, we did a Zoom call for all of our families, kids included, and follow-up email and posting on social media. I think anything live is great. We posted a video. Aloha had some great videos that were helpful for us. And Alfred Lake Camp has produced a really beautiful video.
Yep, theirs was great.
And I think if you look at other camps' videos, that may help you as well. Do you want to talk about programming for the summer, Tracy?
Sure, sure.
Can I just
Sure.
say one thing really quickly? So
Yeah.
Ron and I have just discovered that apparently we have a 100-person or 100-participant limit in this style of meeting. And so if anyone's maybe in adjoining rooms with a coworker or something like that, where you could log out of one device or similar, if you wouldn't mind doing that, and we might be able to get a couple of the other people out there who are trying to get in on this awesome discussion in on it. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's feasible or not, but if so, thank you. Tracy, sorry to interrupt.
No problem, Matt. The summer programming, we are not, we've never done virtual programming like probably many of you, but we are going to work on doing some. We're also using the US mail for a lot of physical arts and crafts activities that we can get into our girls' hands, some nature activities. So in our 10-day sessions, we're planning on sending like 3 mailings of, things to do, how to make a boat that floats, and different creative things that they might or might not take us. Some are like prepackaged arts and crafts ideas for them to do. We're also going to do Zoom. I'm fortunate my assistant director is excellent, has been teaching virtually. She's a chemistry teacher, and she's been teaching virtually. So she knows all about Google Classroom. And we're going to use that platform for our kids where they have to have, a password to get into. And that's a whole different, I think, topic on how you do that safely. And again, your insurance people have ideas on that. If you need your mandating and reporting, you have to train your staff, whoever you're going to have on the virtual media, you have to train them in the mandate reporter and a few other things. But as we're doing that, that's pretty, we'll let you know in August how successful we are in that. It's new to all of us, I think.
I think, go ahead, I'm sorry. Oh,
no.
Okay. I think it would be terrific if we could somehow have some kind of a clearinghouse or some opportunity to share ideas about programming. Our population's a little bit different than Tracy's, and so we're going off in a different direction. It may be a little bit less educational and more kind of matching some of the special events that go on here. But either way, I think that we've got a lot to share with one another. I know that we ought to be talking with our insurance agencies about any concerns about electronic interaction between campers and staff. So definitely talk to your insurance people about that. And I think involving parents to whatever degree possible on our end has been helpful, so that we're not, in a sense, kind of just only speaking with the campers. It's nice to have the parents committed as well. Are there any thoughts or questions that other folks have about programming that would be good for us to be hearing about?
And And I'd just also like to, just a bit more generally, also say I recognize that there's other camps here represented who have already closed. And if you guys have any input or words of wisdom or advice as these topics are coming up, please feel free to either jump in or raise your hand, and I'll call on you as I see it. But yeah, if anyone's got anything for Peter's question about those ideas around programming.
I'm seeing Hurricane Island has some good suggestions that are coming up on the chat, so that would be a great link for us all to have. Okay. Finances are another issue that I'm sure crosses the gamut, right? I mean, some of us with boards of directors have had them step in. Some of us are more independent and have less backup. You know, we're all, you know, everybody's finances are different. What we found, and we're not in a position to provide full refunds, but what we found is that families are generally supportive. We're trying to be as transparent as possible about our circumstances. There is some resistance here and there, and we're having to talk with families about that and try to be flexible. Any thoughts about how we handle the financial aspect of this? Tracy, do you want to chime in, and then maybe other folks have some wisdom to share?
Sure. So we're not tuition based. We rely 100% on foundations and individual solicitations to people. And as you can imagine, the solicitations are, many people are hurting right now. And so our fundraising is usually going on right now. So we've had to kind of switch our model to try and convince people that our virtual programming is still valid and there's some, you know, positive aspects in that. We're concerned about fundraising for sure, and I'm sure most small nonprofits are. You know, excuse me. So, you know, we're doing our best to solicit, and I know my development manager, the foundations are really hard hit at this point. A lot of them are suspending their giving for a year or two. I don't know how many of you out there are in that same position when, you know, you're used to knocking on doors for different foundations and they're just saying, well, come back next year and talk to us. So finances are definitely of a huge concern for small nonprofits.
Jack?
Want to point out two things that are important. One is we've written a memo on tuition return, which has been published by MSC, so that's available. The second thing is there's been some really nice webinars on virtual programming, which obviously take into account the problem child, which is the legal issues involved, both from the standpoint of staff and camper interaction, but one that I hadn't thought of until I looked at the video, which is a whole series of legal issues around the using music or stories that are written by authors. You're broadcasting them now and as a part of your program, and there are all kinds of copyright issues that pop up. And so there was an excellent seminar a week or so ago, I think put on by ACA maybe, that would be looked at.
Thanks for that, Jack. And I believe that ACA webinar you're referring to, I believe that the recording of that is now available as well. There was another one this week as well on privacy concerns for virtual camp offerings. So, you know, I think we all need to approach any new programming we're doing this summer with the same intentionality that we do our regular in-person summer programming. And so it's a new way of thinking. And to Peter's point, can I get just a show of hands or raise your hand in the next to your participant? is there much interest here if MSC tried to organize maybe a weekly or bi-weekly sort of meeting around programming ideas for this summer? Would people be interested in that? Just sort of a straw poll here. Yeah. And I can't see all your screens at once, so either just a reaction or a raised hand or something. Okay. So yeah. All right. It looks like there's quite a bit of interest in that. So we'll work on putting something together. Peter or Tracy, can one of you also talk about you know, just sort of the ideas around getting some of the amazing, creative, thoughtful and smart people here to sort of think about what the impact of the implications, I guess, of closing camp for this summer in the short, medium, longer term, and maybe sort of getting together to address some of those or think about some of those sorts of things.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is, you should ask me at 2 or 3 in the morning, which is when I'm always thinking about this. But anyway, Tracy, go ahead.
Well, one of my concerns is once we decided that we were going to suspend this year is the staff and how much that's going to, you know, are they going to move on to another camp, which is great if they do, but how many staff are you going to lose along the way, and what your return rate will be for 2021 is a big concern. And I'm not sure, other than, you know, reaching out and connecting with them. I think it's, you know, I think we're all probably going to lose either key staff or a number of staff along the way for any number of reasons. And I think that's a big concern.
Yeah, we've thought about that. We've thought about that too, in terms of families, in terms of staffing, and part of what we kind of fall back on to provide maybe a little bit of solace is that, you know, we know everything's going to change. Everything in society may change, and there may be some changes here, and we might decide in terms of programming, for example, next summer, you know, we might offer a few less programs and take some of the pressure off of ourselves in terms of hiring and scheduling and that sort of thing. So it may be that, you know, we have to take a look at ourselves, and each camp would have to do this because our programs are so different, and decide, you know, what's the essence of this camp, what's the mission of this camp, what's essential, and then what can we let go of if we have to kind of regroup and kind of start from a little bit from the beginning and kind of rebloom a little bit over the coming years. That's how I end up falling back asleep at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point, Peter. If we're looking for the silver lining, it might be that we have the time to reevaluate our programs and, as you said, see what's really important and what is the mission of each of our camps.
And you don't want to say well, let me start all over again. We may find that sort of, you know, returning to our roots is both painful and helpful.
Right.
I'm trying to think if I've got anything else. One of the things that's come up for us, because we've written letters and talked with a lot of families, is they say, oh, you know, we might take a trip up to Maine. You know, these are the New York families that have probably been dying to escape, you know. And you know, we can come by. One fellow proposed that they stay over for a couple of nights in one of the cabins with their family. And so we're torn because we know that we need to restrict access to the camp. We have some families who live here and a newborn, and we've got all kinds of health and safety precautions in place already. At the same time, it's the same as any other summer. A family says, hey, I want to stop by. You know, how do you say no if they might want to sign up in 2021? And so we're beginning to determine how do we accept visitors and what restrictions do we put on that. I don't know if anybody else has been thinking about this. Okay.
Probably the answer is, Peter, probably everyone's been thinking about it, but just no one's come up with an answer yet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sue McMullen is asking if she's allowed, if we can take her mute off because she'd like to share something. Is that possible, Matt?
Yeah, let me just find you here, Sue, and unmute you. Go ahead, Sue.
Hi, everybody. I am so awful at typing and being able to listen at the same time, so that tells you a lot about me. I just wanted to, first of all, I just think it's so incredibly important that we all stick together, no matter what our decision, and that we lean on one another, because, you know, every camp is different, and yet I think that we are dealing with some hugely sensitive issues right now for our families, no matter what our decision is, whether it's them wanting to do it and being uncomfortable but doing it and yet want to do it, and those who are in support of those of us who made the decision not to do it or whatever. But I think over and above everything that we've talked about, our connection with our families is going to be number one, no matter what. And we may not have the answers, I think, but what we have found is that, of course, our families, I hope, are going to be in support. We've had hundreds of emails of support of the decision. That does not make us right, so I'm not trying to imply that. But I think our continued support and connection with them, with either by Zoom meetings or staff meetings or surveys to go out to parents to say how much screen time do you want your child to have? They've been in forever, and so what are we? Alumni being in touch, wanting to be pen pals with some of our campers because they've had summers away from camp and have some perspective. I don't know. I just come back to what's important in our hearts, you guys, because we all have that as camp directors. We love our families, and I think if we can just stick with who we are as a camp and realize we don't have all the answers, but to stay in touch with these families, parents and campers, is going to be the number one thing, I think, for all of us. And I think these things that are coming up about finance, we're independently owned too, and we're going to take a huge hit. And everybody's looking at it, and our families are taking a huge hit, perhaps with their investments or whatever. So I think, you know, not having the answers is an okay thing always, but I think connection is going to be the most important thing. That's what I keep hearing with all the emails that I'm receiving. Connection, 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 and how they feel about who we are as leaders in their children's lives and in their families. So sorry, that would have been a very long typing, and I'd still be typing if I had to do that. So thank you for
Well, I'm glad we unmuted you, because that's lovely. And I think it's also reassuring. I was speaking with a relatively new camp director last week, and one of the things I was reminded is that, you know, sometimes we have these stretches, whether it's during the winter or the summer, where we only hear from the people who have something negative to say or who haven't learned to trust us yet. And we have to remind ourselves that there's all those other people out there who do trust us. And it's terrific to hear that you're getting all those emails. We're certainly getting them as well. And that, I think, provides the basis. It doesn't mean that we know exactly what to do, but it gives us the raw ingredients, which are so important. And I think that'll, if I can segue to the next comment from Kat, I think that's going to be true for staff as well. And that we may not know exactly what the next steps are with staff, but staying in touch with them will be crucial.
Can I break in for just a minute, Peter?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
When I started practice, there were over 400 camps in the state of Maine, and today there are less than 200.
Wow.
So I've spent a lot of time looking at what are the problems of camp, and Sue McMullen is right on that. Probably the most important thing you can do is to stay in contact with your families, because the camps that do fail because they lose alumni, or they lose customers, they lose families, they drift away, and that continued connection makes all the difference in the world from the standpoint of the statistics over the 40 or 50 years I've been looking at it about what camps can come back and what camps cannot.
Thanks, Jack. And it reminds me, what we've been doing since March, I mean, since this hit and we knew circumstances were different, is that every Thursday we send out an email to families. Sometimes we have something of substance to talk about. If we don't, then that's where we have to start imagining what a family might want to be thinking about. And so we make sure that every week they hear from us. And we just have to sort of figure out, as we pivot toward the summer, what that might look like.
And the second piece of that, just so you know, is not only the conversation is going to be better if it's two ways than one. So right. Not only should the camps be writing, but they should be doing things which encourage the parents and the kids to correspond back, so that connection is held.
Great advice there, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to
Emily.
jump in. I asked Matt
for
permission to speak. When this all started, I run Camp Alsing. When this all started, I was reminded, I thought, God, this has never happened before, camps having to close. And then I was reminded that when I was 10 years old, the camp that I had been to for 2 years as a camper, for 10 years at family camp, that my mother went to, that my sister went to, a very traditional camp in Wisconsin, closed in May abruptly due to family issues that were beyond their control. It is a time in my life I'll never forget, when I was 10. And I was put in a little different position of being able to pick another camp and having to make that choice with my parents on the fly. And what has helped me in this, and I'm going to share a little bit of that story with our campers if we do have to close, is that camp obviously is still a part of my life 35 years later. And I had wonderful camp experiences after that time. Now, I did not return to that camp, but even that camp, 30 years later, welcomes over 400 girls every summer. And they did find their path again, and it's in use. My niece goes there.
Wow.
My family still goes there for family camp. And so what felt at the time like impossible has really, created amazing new pathways. And that's a message that I'm gonna share in some way with our families if we have to close, and certainly feel free to tell your own version of it to someone if you want to. But kind of, Peter, going back to what you were saying, sometimes going back to your roots, or sometimes a change, not to be too Pollyannish about what is a very difficult situation. That has helped me, is that I've actually in some ways been through this in a way before, and it will be recovered.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks so much. I'm seeing quite a few comments coming through about how we're handling staff, and and to kind of harken back to what Sue was saying, often when Meg and I don't know the answer to a question, or we're stumbling over something, how do we move forward? Having a few staff in residence and Zooming with some of our key staff has found us our step forward. This is just like in the summer, right? We just can't take all of this on without the support that we're accustomed to, and these people who we've trained and attracted to our programs. And so, what Mike is talking about, what Anna's talking about, I think are all great ideas. What we're doing, we have a few staff who are in residence, and we're having 3 more come up in quarantine, starting Saturday for 2 weeks. And then they'll join this group of, I think it's going to be about 10 people who are all going to be a family here. And they'll work on our virtual programming. But there's a core group there that I think will serve as advisors for Meg and myself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Can I get either Mike or Anna to just talk a little bit about what you're suggesting with Maine-based staff and having them do, and particularly I think that the idea of using the staff that you do have this summer for facility improvements would be phenomenal. And I see Anna's right there, so I'm going to unmute her right now.
Sure, yeah. Our model right now is we're going to invite however many we end up feeling will be safe, maybe 8, maybe 12 of our staff who either live in Maine or have a place that they can quarantine for 2 weeks in Maine before coming to camp. And then we'll have them at camp for maybe 3.5 weeks and do a virtual program during that time. They'll work maybe 15 hours a week on virtual programming, maybe 10 to 15 on camp maintenance. And we're just hoping it'll increase our retention and also like follow through on a tiny bit of the employment that we had promised some of these folks. And that our virtual programming will be better if it's done on site than if it's done in their childhood bedrooms at their parents' house where they've been for the last several months. And one question I have for the group or for Matt or anyone is, my board is really interested in our site being like a family recreation site. Like, would families want to stay in our cabins, 2 families at a time or something on the whole site? And I'm really not that interested in that because I think it would be less fun than people imagine. Like, camp is fun because everyone's there, and without that, we don't have any horses or ropes course or anything. But I'm curious if anyone else is looking at that model.
Anyone looking at that have experience with it so far, or has started going down that path? Kim, I see you there.
Am I unmuted? Good.
Yeah.
So we actually happen at Snow Pond. We also have a lodging license because we operate year round. And so one of the things that we have moved to, we chose to not have our program and announced that a week ago. But we are renting our cabins, and we just posted that yesterday, and we've had about 15 alumni and camp families already reach out about wanting to come. So we have, fortunately, because we have the lodging and restaurant license here, we have a lot more flexibility, and we have, you know, enough property, and the cabins are spaced out enough that everybody can come and actually do their 2-week quarantine, you know, and then be able to use the facility completely. So it's one of the only ways that we're going to financially be able to try to piece this together. As Peter was saying, it's such a huge hit, and we're a nonprofit, and even though we operate year round, our expenses are year round as well. So, you know, dealing with refunds is going to be particularly challenging for us. But I think you're right, Anna, that, you know, it's not going to be the same experience, but we're going to try to offer them as much use of the recreational facilities and the grounds. We have, you know, 200 acres of hiking trails across the street that they can use. And at least for people, as we were saying, that have been locked up in cities or in homes with people for a couple of months, it'll hopefully give them a little bit of opportunity and, again, allow us to maintain a good relationship with a lot of our families and alums.
That's brilliant.
We've considered something like that, and I'm seeing Henry's comment here. One of the deal breakers for us was that we were reluctant to establish a dining hall program for all the reasons that maybe have led a lot of us to close camp. And our 2 dining hall directors are older, and one has some underlying conditions, and so that steered us away from what Kim's talking about. Although I have to say I'm a little jealous. That sounds good.
Well, it helps that we have a restaurant license and we've been doing takeout meals for 2 months already. So for the people that are quarantining, we'll just deliver the meals to their cabins. So.
Right. Yeah. So I think that this is great though, because it's starting to get the wheels turning for everyone and starting to get the recognition that we don't have to use the same pun or analogy twice. We don't have to reinvent the wheel when we're considering these options. We have an amazing community here that's been thinking through all these questions already. So I think one of our goals as an organization is going to be to continue finding platforms where we can continue sharing this information. Heather, do you mind if I unmute you to talk a little bit about, you're talking about a slightly different model for the rental of cabins?
Sure. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, my video's not working, so my apologies. This is really just my 3 a.m. brainstorm, just looking at ways that, you know, we could, if we decide to close, we have not made the decision yet, to supplement some of the income as a nonprofit. We do weddings in the shoulder season, but looks like those will be canceled as well. So right now, thought process, we have our staff cottages have kitchens. So we would only rent, almost like an Airbnb model, that we could rent the staff cottages, so people would be responsible for their own meals. They would sign liability forms as far as they could use our waterfront and some of our outdoor spaces, hiking trails, tennis courts, but we would not be a resort. We would not be offering full activities. They would just be able to use the grounds. As someone else, I believe, mentioned, it would be wonderful for people to get, you know, to the spot. And I know alumni have, quite a few alumni have emailed me about that, offering their support, that we have not mentioned it, but they came to me and said, you know, if you have to close, we'd love to be able to help. And the other thing is we'd love the chance to be able to come to camp in the summer. So really this was a 3 a.m. thought, and I started putting some things on paper. If we were to close, could that be an option? I'm not sure if it would, especially given our nonprofit status, but it's something I may look into.
Thank you. And I think Matt from Camp Beechcliff just mentioned that if you are a nonprofit and you're thinking about doing something like that, then certainly consult with an attorney or similarly knowledgeable person who can make sure that you're not straying too far from your mission.
Absolutely. And we do that with our weddings. So we have some counsel on that, but that would be the biggest thing we'd have to look into.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, you know, Mike and I had talked about this, and I'm seeing his comment, you know, for those of us who are closed or will be closed, how can we assist other camps, right? I mean, which raises the larger issue of what are we going to do with our time, you know, which I'm sure we've all been thinking about. I think we're thinking of having some chickens this summer. That might be a start. You know, I think that this is another function, maybe, Matt, that we can talk about as on MSC, is, you know, having a little brain trust or of folks who are willing to assist either the larger camp movement in the state or specific camps, if that's something that would be possible.
Yeah, I think that conversation's been happening from my sense, has been happening quite a lot around the place, and that, you know, camps, that's one of the great things about this community, is camps want to look out for each other. And so our next call at 12 o'clock is going to be those camps that are looking to open, and certainly there might be some issues that arise in that discussion that would be really suitable for exploration and further digging by the people who are represented here. So again, you know, I think MSC can play a strong role in helping to facilitate those sorts of brains trusts.
Can I say one more thing? I mean, I know we're winding down. I talked with a mom who had been a camper here as well, and has 2 boys who are just so upset about this. And she said, you know, I'm not religious, but there's got to be some kind of spiritual lesson here that I can help my boys with. And I think we probably, whether we're religious or not, I think we find ourselves thinking that way these days. One of the best pieces of advice that we got along the way as we were making our decision a couple of weeks ago was a clinical psychologist I was speaking with, who said, you know, sometimes you don't have a choice about matters of life and death, and sometimes you do. And he said, when you do, life gets to win. And that really made an impression on us. And somehow I thought about that and the following at the same time. One of our staff who's here came up with a great idea. It's why it's great to have people around. And she said, let's send every camper a little square of material, and we'll have them decorate it with something that reminds them of camp. And they'll send it back here, and we'll tell them that when they get to camp in 2021, there'll be a quilt to commemorate how we worked as a community for the summer of 2020. And I think these kinds of community moments and spiritual moments, I think, will carry us through, and are the kinds of things I think we've all been talking about, that Jack talked about, Sue talked about, that involve families and will help us all in the long run.
Thanks, Peter. Tracy, anything else?
Not, I mean, I think, like everybody has said, staying in touch with our communities is the most important thing at this point, to remind them that we're here for them. That we're still here, even though we're physically aren't together. We're sending T-shirts out to all our campers, and in the back we just have a heart that says "Together in Spirit." Just that reminder that we're here for our families and kids.
Yeah, brilliant. Jack, we have a good question has come up from Matt Cornish. As a day camp, he's suggesting that if your camp is not opening, potentially being able to link up some of your staff who are now looking for employment with families who are looking for childcare for their kids. And he just wants to know if there's any potential legal issues with providing a list of staff. And I'm not sure if he's talking just from his camp or from camps more broadly, providing a list of staff who might be available and we know are good with kids.
I think it depends on some things that he doesn't say. For example, if you're doing it without the expectation of any reward yourself, then you're not in the business of placing staff. If you're merely saying, here are staff that we know that are looking for employment, I don't think that there's any issue. I certainly wouldn't recommend any of them. That is, I would say, here are staff that are available, so that you're not endorsing them, nor would I recommend that you charge for that service. If you don't do either of those, I don't see any problems, at least thinking about it as long as I have just now.
See Rebecca nodding along there. Rebecca, anything to add to that?
No, I agree with those points. I think you just want to make it clear that this is not a function of camp and not a service that camp is providing, that you are just giving a list of names, similar to a school giving, here's a list of tutors, but we're not endorsing anyone.
Brilliant. Matt, did that answer your question? Yes, he says, thank you. Is there any other questions that anyone has? This has been, I think, a pretty productive 50 minutes. Is there anything that anyone was hoping to hear that has not been addressed at this point? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I'm not sure if anyone's raised their hand. I don't see anything. I don't think this is going to be the last one of these meetings we have. I think there was a lot of stuff that has been brought up that we will be looking to explore further. So I don't know, Peter and Tracy, Ron, does anyone have any inspiring closing words for us before we sign off here?
Oh, I wish it's going to be a great summer. We just don't know exactly what that means, but I think it's going to be a splendid summer. Look for all those silver linings that Tracy was talking about.
And Matt, I think we will be looking for ways to have camps that had suspended this summer for regular camp to participate in a variety of ways to help other camps and to really help the organization.
And I just have one other comment. I do think it is really good to look at other people's materials in regards to what they have shared with their communities. My son's camp just recently postponed their season, and his first comment was, is this going to count as a camp a year? So there are going to be a lot of questions in regards to that come up, and it's interesting the perspective of like your kids. But then he thankfully was looking at this all, well, I get to spend time with you, Mom. Like we get to do things together, and so every child and every family are going to handle it differently, and I guess, as everyone said, just supporting each other.
Good luck to all, and whichever way your decision making goes. You know, the MSC and the amazing leadership that we have in Ron and Jack in the office there, and then Bajette and the rest of the board is here as much as, well, I would say right now is here more than should be physically possible. They seem to spend more time on Zoom calls than there are in hours of the day. But you know, we have a great community here. I think all of us know from our own personal summer camp experience that there's nothing more powerful than, you know, community that supports each other. So we're each other's support right now, and good luck to you all.
And Matt, I really appreciate the fact that camps are keeping me up to date in what's going on, so that I'm able to share it with others.
Brilliant. Yeah. So let Ron know when you make a decision. All right. Thank you, Ron. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Be well, everyone. Thank you.